Well, a footnote to this: despite having suspended its compliance with the treaty, Russia says it is concerned about the potential for a new arms race and accuses the US of endangering global stability. We'll follow the story. Another big story too ahead of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union at the end of March. Tensions between London and Brussels are beginning to fray. On Wednesday, the bloc's chief Donald Tusk hit out at his British counterparts with some pretty extraordinary criticism.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
The EU Council President made the statement alongside the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar in Brussels as they were leaving the stage. The microphones picked up a conversation between the two as the Irish Prime Minister told the EU Council President, "The British press are going to give you a bit of stick for this." They certainly have done that. But from the political side, Andrea Leadsom, the leader of the House of Commons in the UK, has said that Donald Tusk must apologise for his comments. Home Secretary Sajid Javid has said that he was out of order. But what we've seen is a whole host of the hardline arch-Brexiteer talking heads and politicians in the British media clutching their pearls, rending garments over what's been said by Donald Tusk. It is worth pointing out, he did say that those that pushed Brexit, those that backed Brexit, those that sold Brexit, not those that voted for Brexit, as has been reported in some places in the United Kingdom. Tusk, though, has at times really played good cop in these negotiations from the European side. This time around, though, it fell to Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission President, to try and, well, raise the mood a little bit. But even then, he could only rely on a bit of dark humour.
I'm less Catholic than my good friend Donald. So he strongly believes in heaven, and by opposite, in hell. I believe in heaven, and I have never seen the hell apart during the time I was doing my job here. It's a hell.
So that was Wednesday, really a bit of a distraction from the business of Brexit. It's down to brass tacks on Thursday, though. Theresa May is in Brussels for talks with Jean-Claude Juncker and other senior EU leaders. There's still no further movement on what type of deal, if there will be any deal, when Britain ultimately does leave the European Union, if Britain does leave the European Union on March 29th, and that is just 50 days away.
Yeah, and counting. Well, meantime, more of this, the European Parliament's Brexit coordinators also weighed in, suggesting that the UK's Leave campaigners wouldn't even be granted a place in purgatory. We spoke to a former Deputy Mayor of London, Roger Evans. He claims that the EU is treating the UK unfairly and that the bloc is also to blame for the current impasse over Brexit.
Well, I'm not surprised by Donald Tusk's reaction today, because in all the time that I spent in Europe, it was pretty clear that the people in charge had this sort of dismissive attitude. So it's been a long-term problem. As to his accusation that people didn't do proper planning around this, I think there's a lot of blame on the EU's side here as well. Remember, the EU constitution was supposed to be able to allow members to leave when they wanted to. There's supposed to be an Article 50 process, and it's really proved to be difficult to follow the process and to understand it. It's quite clear that they wrote all of that law without ever expecting to have to use it. Indeed, it probably isn't worth the paper it's written on, and I think no-deal situation is going to be problematical for both sides, but it won't be anywhere near as problematical as people are talking about. Remember, we've got all of the agreements in place, and just because we tick over that day that says we're out of the European Union doesn't mean that all of those working processes and ways we work together suddenly come to an end unless one side wants them to or not. And why would they?
Next story. Unacceptable and contradictory is how Doctors Without Borders has described the findings of a new Saudi report, which claims that the humanitarian group was partly to blame for the bombing of one of its own hospitals in Yemen in June. The organisation says the Saudi-led coalition is attempting to avoid taking full responsibility for the airstrike. According to the disputed report, MSF, as the group's also known, Médecins Sans Frontières, failed to inform the coalition that its cholera treatment centre was a medical facility. Further, it claims that as a result, the building was considered at the time to be a legitimate military target. MSF, though, says no. It said it notified the Saudi coalition about the newly built hospital at least 12 times and also had its own emblem displayed on the roof. Riyadh since called the bombing an unintended error.